We are going to look at a game between Yasser Seirawan with white pieces and Anatoly Karpov with black. This is a game where the tactics actually worked against Karpov. So Yasser, knight f3, and I'll just skip through the opening moves rather quickly, although we will have interest in the first move already. So we have here after bishop takes, queen take, g3, rook e8, and rook c3. This is something that Yasser Seirawan had prepared himself. Karpov also looked into this line, and there are some threats and lines here that you actually will see with rook to e3. Black played knight a6, and Yasser here played queen to a4, with the threat on the rook of e8, and it's also hitting, of course, the knight on a6. The threat of rook to e3 might win full rook if nothing is done. Black played here c5, interesting enough. Now, the game is played in 1982, so before you shout, oh, the computer says minus, or sorry, the computer says plus 1.8 or something in that line, please remember that in 1982 we didn't have strong computers. I even wonder if there were computers capable of playing chess at all at the time. So the preparation was done by them figuring out which lines worked and how, and it is actually very, very challenging to look very deep at that time. Rook to e3, continuing the plan, and bishop to e6, allowing white to take. Now, queen takes a6, getting the piece, and now c takes. Now Karpov is still in his preparation, and you can see that this is quite annoying threat. You have your rook under attack, and a different threat here is queen to b4 check. So you clearly cannot play something like knight takes d4, because there goes your knight, and black is clearly better. So Seirawan played rook to b3, stopping both threats, and now bishop to f5. Now the idea behind this is, again, if you would take by knight takes d4, then you get queen to c5, threatening the knight and threatening checkmate on c1, and the bishop is preventing white to play the defensive move queen to d3, since clearly that would fall. So Yasser did not take the pawn, despite the fact of him being the president of the pawn grabber club, but he was up material enough, and yeah, the thing you can really do with chess is, if you're up material, then don't be too greedy, just use your advantage and get out of the troubles you have, and that is what Yasser tried to do here. So bishop g2, good move. Bishop to c2. Now knight takes d4, defending the pawn on e2, defending the knight on, defending the rook on b3, and of course hitting the bishop, taking the rook, and here clearly you cannot take with the pawn, because then we have the annoying check again, so we take with the knight, and after we take with the knight, Karpov plays rook a to c8, with a clear intention of playing rook c2 and then marching on a b2 pawn. Yasser here played move bishop to f3, wanting to keep the e2 pawn, and yeah, the e2 pawn is also acting as a guard. If you keep the pawn on the board, the battery standing on e7 and e8 is not as strong as it would be without the pawn standing there. Rook c2, carrying out the plan, and now castles. Rook takes, and here, if we take, then black can take, and again, this is a position that Karpov would have been happy with. If you look at the material, then black has a rook versus two pieces, but the pieces are very, very active. The king is a bit weak. There's an extra pawn for black, so clearly black has enough compensation here. So white decided to not opt for that and play rook to d1, threatening to take the pawn with rook whilst he keeps e2 defended by the bishop. rook to d8, defending, and now knight to d4. And on d4 it really now is a beautiful knight, as you can also see by the color scheme. It defends also the pawn on e2. It stops the black rook from going to c2 if it ever wanted to. It has the potential of going to b5. It can be supported by the a2 pawn after an a2, a4 move. There is a direct fork threat on c6. f5 is a very nice square to jump to in some situations, in some lines. So yeah, it's a very, very well placed knight at this particular moment. Also, please note the black rook on b2. If the queen does not defend the a3 square, then the white queen moving to a3 attacks the rook, and the rook has no squares to go to. So very nice position at this moment for white. Rook to d7. And if you now would play e3, it would actually be likely a move I would make, to be honest. It's a good move. It's securing the knight on d4. Is a very solid position for white, and I think white can absolutely go for pushing here. However, Yasser calculated a combination which is better. He moved the knight to c6, hitting the queen clearly. After the queen moves, he decided to go for it and take the pawn on a7. Now, if you now move your queen instantly to a8, this won't work, the spin of the knight, because, well, because of many things, honestly. White can play the reasonable, easy queen to c8 check, and after takes, we are fine. We have other options as well. We can play queen to a3, hitting the rook on b2, and after, let's say, rook to c2, we can drop the knight back, defending the queen that way. Although we might lose our pawn on a2 that way, we don't lose our full knight. Better defense even is rook to c1, and why that is we will actually see also in the alternative lines that are played. So black did not yet play that move. He opted to play rook to c7. In the future perhaps you can move rook to c2, which can be annoying. It clearly is stopping anything going to c8 and giving check, especially the queen. And now queen to a8 might become a more serious threat. At least that's the thought of Karpov. So white continues with a4, and now queen to a8. Now white had calculated the following. Rook takes d5, and well, now you cannot take with your rook clearly, because if you take with rook, we get queen to d3. Now the queen is guarding the h7 square and with threatening checkmate in 2, and the check would also threaten to win the queen, and there is no good response that black can give to this, and it is game over. So we take with the queen, but after taking with the queen, we get rook to d8 check, king a7, h7, and then we have queen d3 check. Now if you play g6, you get this double attack. The queen threatens the rook on b2, and we threaten to checkmate either by with the rook or with the queen on h8. If black would play something like rook b1 check, we just go king to g2. And now f6, we get queen takes f6, rook to g7, queen f8 with the mate threat again, and it's game over. So for that purpose, Karpov played f5 instead. Now we get queen takes f5 check. At g6, you can already see this looks absolutely horrible. Queen to e6, threatening mate again. And yeah, what do you want to do? In this position, Karpov actually resigned. And the reason why he resigned is, well, if he plays rook to g7, we get again queen to e8 with the mate threat, which is very annoying. And if you play rook to c1 check, we get king to g2, and queen to g7 will now be met by rook to d7, and white will win easily. This game is also annotated by Yasser Seirawan himself, one of his Chessable courses. I will leave a link in the description. You'll also find the full PGN. In this video, we didn't really go for the full analytics of the strategical concepts, but we just explored some tactics that were employed against Karpov. Let me know if this is the type of video you want to see in the future, and let me know which kind of games you want to see analyzed as well. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you again in the future. Bye bye.